Animals like you don't belong in first class. A flight attendant slaps a passenger hard across the face, rips her ticket and throws the pieces at her feet. Get on your knees and crawl back to economy, she commands. In 8 minutes, this flight attendant will learn she just assaulted the CEO who owns the entire airline. Welcome to Blissful Whispers. You are not going to want to miss a single second of what happens next. Before we get back to the story, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is down in the comments. And if you already know this attendant went too far, hit that like button and subscribe right now so you never miss a story of justice. Now let's watch what happens. The hum of the G90 engine was a familiar lullaby, but Naomi Sinclair wasn't relaxing. She was working. From seat 2A on American Airlines Flight 447, she watched the cabin through the reflection in her dimmed phone screen. Her thumb moved quickly, tapping notes into a secure app. Pre-departure beverage service, first class, 12 minutes post-boarding. Unacceptable. Gate agent greeting, impersonal, no eye contact. Cabin temp, 2 degrees too warm. This was the real work. The work that happened far from the 47th floor boardroom in Fort Worth. This was the truth. Naomi was dressed for the truth. Her jeans were faded Levi's with a small authentic tear at the knee. Her sneakers were worn Pumas that had seen too many miles. Her only carry-on was a canvas messenger bag slung over a simple gray t-shirt. To the world she was nobody. To American Airlines she was, in fact, everyone. As CEO, she made these incognito flights quarterly, a secret kept by only her chairman and her executive assistant. The VPs could send her polished reports, but Naomi preferred the unfiltered reality of the passenger experience. She was so focused on cataloging a smear on the bulkhead wall that she didn't notice the approach. She heard it first. A short, sharp tisk of disapproval, like a schoolmarm finding gum under a desk. Naomi looked up. Senior Flight Attendant Carolyn Pierce stood before her. The woman's name tag was polished to a high sheen, centered perfectly on her starched uniform. Her blonde hair was a stiff, aerodynamic helmet that looked like it could withstand a Category 4 hurricane. Her smile, however, was a painted-on grimace. Carolyn's eyes weren't on Naomi's face. They were on her feet. The flight attendant's gaze moved slowly, deliberately from the scuffed rubber toes of Naomi's Pumas, up her frayed jeans, past the simple t-shirt, and finally landed on her face with a look of profound, undisguised disgust. Naomi, accustomed to hostile takeovers and aggressive board members, simply waited. She was, after all, gathering data. Carolyn's smile tightened, the corners of her mouth pulling down. She leaned in, her voice low enough to be intimate, yet sharp enough to cut. Animals like you don't belong in first class. The words hung in the pressurized air. The businessman in 3C, who had been loudly typing on his laptop, suddenly went silent. The couple in 1A clinking champagne glasses paused mid-clink. Naomi's focus shifted from COA's observer to something else. She kept her voice perfectly neutral, the same tone she used when a union negotiation went south. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Carolyn saw the calm as defiance. "It was fuel. You heard me. This isn't a shelter. Who did you steal this seat from? Let me see your boarding pass. Now." "It's on my phone," Naomi said, holding up the device. The digital pass was already on the screen, clearly showing Sinclair, Naomi, and seat 2A. "I also have a paper backup in my bag if that's—" She never finished the sentence. Crack. The sound was sharp, unnatural, like a dry branch snapping in a silent forest. It wasn't a tap. It was a full-force, open-palmed slap. Naomi's head snapped to the side, her ear erupting in a high-pitched ring. The metallic tang of blood filled her mouth where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. The entire first-class cabin froze. The man in 3C dropped his stylus. The low murmur of conversation evaporated, sucked into a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. Naomi was stunned, her hand rising instinctively to her face. Her cheek was on fire. But Carolyn was on a righteous, adrenaline-fueled crusade. Before Naomi could even process the assault, the flight attendant snatched the phone from her stunned grip and simultaneously ripped the paper boarding pass from her other hand as she was pulling it from her bag. "This," Carolyn shrieked, her voice now ringing through the cabin, "is what I think of your fake ticket." She didn't just rip it. She shredded it. With a violent, shaking rage, she tore the paper into a dozen tiny pieces. The fragments fluttered to the plush carpet like diseased confetti. She then shoved the phone back hard into Naomi's chest, not caring that Naomi had to fumble to keep it from crashing to the floor. Carolyn leaned in again, her face inches from Naomi's, her eyes blazing with a terrifying self-righteousness. She pointed one long manicured finger at the floor, at the scattered scraps of paper. "Get on your knees and pick up your fake ticket," she commanded, her voice dropping back to a venomous whisper. Naomi stood frozen. She didn't move. She didn't speak. The ringing in her ear was deafening. "Then," Carolyn added, her sneer twisting into something truly ugly, "you can crawl back to economy where you belong." The ringing in Naomi's ear finally subsided, replaced by a new, more ominous sound. It was the quiet click-click-click of the first phone cameras in the cabin being raised to record her humiliation. A bright, vivid, five-fingered handprint was blooming on her dark skin, a brand of public shame for the whole cabin to see. The entire, unbelievable, violent encounter had taken less than 15 seconds. And it was just the beginning. The absolute silence that followed the slap was a physical weight. It pressed down on the cabin, thick and suffocating. It lasted for 4 seconds. In the 5th second, the spell didn't just break, it shattered. It began not with a voice but with a sound. The tiny, insidious click of an iPhone camera lens cover retracting. 1 click became 3. 3 became a dozen. Like a flock of birds taking flight at a gunshot, every passenger in the first-class cabin with a line of sight to seat 2A raised their phone. The frozen tableau of shocked faces melted, their features reforming into the detached, hungry masks of content capture. The horror of the assault was instantly, seamlessly replaced by the irresistible urge to document. In seat 1B, Kinsley Reed, a lifestyle influencer with 2.3 million followers, was faster than all of them. Kinsley didn't see a human rights violation, she saw a viral opportunity. Her perfectly manicured fingers didn't just open the camera app. They swiped to Instagram and stabbed the Go Live button. Her face, framed by a cascade of professionally highlighted blonde hair, appeared in a small circle on her screen. She put on her best, concerned but serious, expression and dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a vital secret with her followers. "Oh my God, you guys, you are not going to believe this," she breathed, her voice trembling with manufactured drama. "I'm on flight 447, and there's literally a scammer in first class right now." She expertly flipped the camera, centering the shot on Naomi. The lens zoomed, sharpening the focus on the vivid, five-fingered red mark blooming on Naomi's dark skin. She was standing perfectly still, her face a mask of stunned, icy calm. "She's been caught trying to steal a seat," Kinsley narrated, her voice dripping with performative sympathy for the real victims. "The flight attendant is handling it perfectly, but the woman is refusing to move. She's being so difficult." A small red icon in the corner of her screen showed 912 viewers. That number was a dam about to break. In the next 10 seconds it clicked past 1,500. Then 3,000. Then 7,000. Kinsley's followers, sensing blood in the water, were sharing the stream at an exponential rate. And the comments began to flood the screen. It wasn't a trickle, it was a toxic waterfall. User 4492, "OMG, is that her?" Travel Pro Dave, "Finally an attendant with a backbone. Zero tolerance. Jen understands, that's what she gets. People like that ruin it for everyone." Kev_dog_88, "Kick her off the plane. Ban her for life." Mama Tathri, "I'm so sick of these entitled people delaying flights. Good for that FA. Style bitched. Ugh, look at what she's wearing. Total trash. Arrest her." "She's just standing there, you guys," Kinsley whispered, panning slightly to show Carolyn. "She's not even apologizing. Look at her. Just, so much entitlement." The poor flight attendant looked so shaken up. The viewer count blasted past 10,000. The digital mob had its pitchforks and they were baying for blood. This wave of virtual validation washed over the physical cabin, and the passengers felt emboldened. They were no longer just witnesses, they were a studio audience. An elderly man in 3C, wearing an expensive three-piece suit and a gold watch, was the first to lend his voice to the chorus. He didn't whisper. He announced, "Disgraceful behavior. Absolutely disgraceful." He glared at Naomi with open contempt, as if she were a piece of filth that had been tracked onto his carpet. "In my day, people knew their proper place in society." His wife, clutching her pearl-white Chanel bag, leaned toward him and said loud enough for several rows to hear, "I don't feel safe with her on this plane, Arthur. Make them remove her." "She's holding us all up," shouted another man from 4A. "I have a connection to make." Carolyn Pierce felt the surge of support. It was a drug. It was intoxicating. She was no longer just an employee. She was a hero. She was the star. Every raised phone was a spotlight, validating her prejudice, celebrating her violence. Her initial hot flash of rage cooled instantly into a chilling, righteous authority. She stepped back into Naomi's personal space. Naomi hadn't moved. She hadn't flinched. Her hand was down at her side, her cheek throbbing in time with her pulse. "Did you not hear me?" Carolyn's voice rose, projecting to her new fanbase. "I said get on your knees." Naomi's spine remained rigid. She did not kneel. This silent, dignified refusal was the one thing Carolyn could not tolerate. It was defiance. It was to her the ultimate proof of guilt. Losing the last thread of her professional restraint, Carolyn grabbed Naomi's shoulders with both hands and shoved her. "You're making this worse for yourself," she snarled, shoving her hard against the leather partition of seat 2C. Naomi caught her balance, her bag swinging heavily at her side. Carolyn jabbed her finger directly into Naomi's sternum, a sharp, stabbing motion. "Criminals like you always do. You think you're above the rules. You think you can just." "You just assaulted me," Naomi said. Her voice cut through the cabin. It wasn't a shriek. It wasn't a sob. It was quiet, steady, and resonated with an arctic coldness that silenced the murmuring passengers. Carolyn froze, her fingers still pointed. "And," Naomi continued, her eyes locking with Carolyn's, "you destroyed my valid boarding pass." This was not the script. The digital mob and the physical one wanted tears. They wanted submission. They wanted a public breakdown. This composure was infuriating. It was the arrogance of a cornered animal that still believed it was the predator. Carolyn's face, which had been a mask of professional outrage, began to crack. A genuine, blotchy red rage flooded her neck and cheeks, clashing with her foundation. "Assaulted you?" she sputtered, her voice breaking with incredulity. "Assaulted you? You're trespassing. You're committing fraud. You are a threat to this aircraft." She spun around, playing to the cameras again, a performer in the round. "You all see this? You see her refusing to comply? She's a danger to all of us. She's probably unstable." Carolyn lunged for the intercom handset by the galley wall, her hand shaking with a cocktail of adrenaline and fury. She punched the button. "Security!" she screeched, her voice echoing through the entire aircraft from the cockpit to the rear galley. "We need security at the forward galley immediately. We have a violent, non-compliant passenger refusing to deplane. Security now." Kinsley Reed's live stream count blasted past 14,000 viewers. Her phone was buzzing so hard with notifications it nearly vibrated off her tray table. "It's getting so real, you guys," she whispered, her eyes wide with a delicious, manufactured fear. "They're calling the police on her. Oh my God." Heavy footsteps pounded the carpeted jet bridge, the sound distinct from the shuffling of boarding passengers. It was an urgent, heavy-souled sound of authority. The buzzing theater of whispers in the first-class cabin instantly ceased. Two men appeared, their uniforms acting as armor, their expressions grim. They filled the narrow entryway, displacing the air. The first was Mark Fuller, the gate operations manager. He was a man in his late 50s, compressed by a life of thankless work. A permanent scowl seemed etched into the folds around his mouth, and he radiated the weary, aggressive energy of someone who'd spent 2 decades dealing with lost luggage, overbooked flights, and furious customers. His polyester suit was rumpled, his tie was slightly askew, but he clutched his radio handset like it was a scepter of power. Behind him, and infinitely more imposing, was Captain Frank Bishop. At 60, the captain was the very image of command. His silver hair was impeccably groomed, and his heavily decorated uniform was pressed to a razor's edge. His jaw was set so tightly it looked carved from granite, and his eyes, the eyes that scanned distant horizons for thunderstorms, were now narrowed into tiny, furious slits. He didn't look at the passengers. He didn't look at Naomi. He looked at his watch and then at the problem standing in the aisle. Carolyn Pierce, who seconds before had been a snarling bulldog, underwent an instantaneous, breathtaking transformation. Her shoulders slumped. Her hand flew to her chest, her breath hitching in a perfect, calculated performance of a woman deeply, profoundly shaken. She looked as though she might faint. "Oh, thank God you're here, Mr. Fuller." "Captain," she stammered, her voice cracking with manufactured fear. Mark Fuller stepped past the galley, his gaze sweeping the cabin. He saw the recording phones, the staring passengers, and then his eyes moved directly through Naomi, as if she were a ghost, or more accurately, a piece of misplaced luggage. He addressed only his employee. "What's the situation here, Carolyn?" he barked, his voice all gravel. "Attempted seat fraud, sir," Carolyn reported, her lower lip trembling. "I caught her trying to sneak into 2A. When I confronted her, she had absolutely no valid pass, no identification. She became immediately combative. She paused, taking another shuddering breath as she pointed a shaking finger at Naomi. She got physical. She shoved me. She started screaming. I've never been so frightened in 20 years of flying. She's completely unstable." Kinsley Reed's livestream camera panned perfectly, capturing Carolyn's brave victim monologue, then zooming in on Naomi's stoic, silent figure and the bright red mark on her face. The visual contrast was damning. Kinsley whispered to her 18,000 viewers, "The poor woman. That person actually attacked her. This is insane." The comment section exploded in a fresh torrent of vitriol. "Fire her. Press charges. She attacked the crew? Send her to jail. An no-fly list. Now. Disgusting animal." Mark Fuller finally turned his full, undivided attention to Naomi. His eyes, small and irritated, did the same slow, insulting scan Carolyn's had. He started at the scuffed pumas. He lingered on the torn knee jeans. He registered the plain t-shirt. His expression, already sour, curdled into one of profound, obvious disgust. This was not a customer. This was a problem to be disposed of. "Ma'am," he barked. It was not a question. It was a command. "I am going to need to see your government-issued photo identification and your boarding pass. Immediately." Naomi kept her voice low, steady, despite the pulse hammering in her bruised cheek and the humiliation burning in her gut. "As I told your employee, she destroyed my paper boarding pass. My digital pass is on my phone, which she almost made me drop. My identification is in my bag." She made a slight move toward her messenger bag. "Don't reach for anything." Mark snapped, taking a half step back. "She's lying." Carolyn interjected, her voice sharp again. "Her pass was a fake. It was a bad photocopy, sir. I could tell immediately. It was flimsy. I tore it up per company policy regarding fraudulent documents." Mark nodded, accepting this blatant fabrication without a single follow-up question. The airline's official policy was to confiscate and report fraudulent documents, not destroy them in a fit of rage. "I am not asking you again," Mark said, his voice dropping. "Hand me your identification. Now." "And I am telling you," Naomi said, her patience, her superhuman CEO-level composure finally beginning to fray, "that your employee assaulted me. I am a ticketed passenger in seat 2A. My name is Naomi Sinclair." Me up. This was entirely too much for Captain Frank Bishop. He had remained silent, his fury building like pressure in a boiler. He now stepped past Mark, his polished black shoe coming within an inch of Naomi's sneaker. His 6'2" frame seemed to suck all the air out of the aisle. His entire presence radiated a cold, absolute, and unquestionable authority. He didn't speak to Naomi. He spoke about her as if she weren't there. "I don't have time for this," he snarled, his voice a low growl that carried easily through the silent cabin. The passengers in the first few rows visibly recoiled. "We are already 3 minutes behind our pushback time." 3 minutes. He turned his blazing eyes on Mark Fuller. "What is this amateur hour, Fuller? You're letting this person hold up an entire 777? We have 280 souls on board and a departure slot at JFK we will miss because you're down here debating." "Captain, I'm handling," Mark began, his managerial bluster instantly deflating under the captain's glare. "No, you're not," Bishop corrected him. "You're letting her talk." He pointed a thick, powerful finger directly at Naomi, the tip of it so close to her face she could see the whorls of his fingerprint. "I want her off my aircraft. I don't care what her story is. She is a disruption. She is a delay. Get her off. Now." The finality of it was stunning. He was judge, jury, and executioner, and the trial had lasted less than 30 seconds. His priority was not justice, not safety, not even basic human decency. His God was the schedule. His only sin was a delay. Captain, Naomi tried one last time, appealing to the man's sense of logic, the part of his brain that flew a $300 million piece of machinery. I am the one who was assaulted. I am a paying, ticketed passenger. All I am asking is for you to look at your own records. Check the manifest. It will take 10 seconds. My name is on it. Mark Fuller, red-faced from the captain's reprimand and eager to regain his approval, scoffed. He stepped in front of Naomi, creating a physical barrier between her and the captain. Ma'am, we're done here. He unclipped his radio from his belt, his thumb moving to the transmit button. We don't negotiate with criminals. The phrase hit Naomi harder than the slap. Criminals. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy. The hierarchy had closed ranks. The captain, the manager, the flight attendant, 3 pillars of the airline, forming an impenetrable wall of prejudice. They were a single entity protecting their own, and she was the other, on the outside. They weren't just wrong, they were proud of being wrong. They saw their bigotry as procedure. Kinsley Reed's stream, now cresting 22,000 live viewers, captured the moment perfectly. The captain is here, she whispered urgently, her eyes wide. He is laying down the law. She is so busted. They are not playing you guys. She's getting removed. Mark Fuller raised the radio to his mouth. Dispatch, this is Fuller at 42A. The situation is not resolved. The individual is refusing all lawful orders. We need security and police back here for an immediate, forced removal. Mark Fuller was on his radio, his back to Naomi, confirming the call for forced removal. Captain Frank Bishop stood like a stone sentinel, arms crossed, glaring at his watch as if he could intimidate time itself. This was the moment. Carolyn Pierce felt it. This was the nexus of her power. She had the full, unblinking support of her manager, the absolute authority of her captain, and the undivided, adoring attention of a cabin full of recording phones. She wasn't just an employee, she was the protector of this privileged space, the righteous hand of justice. The criminal was cornered, the police were coming, and the digital mob was cheering her name. It was time for the grand finale. Her eyes fell upon the carpet near Naomi's feet. The scraps. The shredded, fake boarding pass. The evidence. With a dramatic sigh of weary duty, as if cleaning up after a disobedient child, Carolyn bent down. But this was no act of service. It was an act of aggression. She slowly, deliberately, scooped the dozen or so paper fragments from the plush carpet. She held them in her open palm, cupped as if presenting a specimen. Kinsley Reed's camera zoomed in instantly. You guys, look at this, she's got the fake ticket, she whispered to her rapidly growing audience, now cresting 25,000. She's got the proof. The captain is so mad. This woman is completely, totally done. Carolyn held her hand high for all the passengers, and all their cameras, to see. Her professional smile was gone, replaced by a mask of cold, theatrical contempt. This, she announced, her voice projecting to the hushed cabin, is what we do to fakes. She didn't put the scraps in her apron pocket. She didn't walk them to the galley trash. Instead, she turned, took one step into the open galley area, and threw the paper scraps onto the floor. Then she lifted her company-issued black heel. She placed it directly on top of the largest fragment and ground it into the floor. It was a slow, twisting, deliberate motion, her full weight bearing down. She ground the paper into the carpet fibers as if she were crushing a cigarette butt, or something far worse, something she found utterly repulsive. The sound was a dull, gritty scrunch in the silent cabin. She was, in this single, symbolic act, erasing Naomi. The cabin watched this bizarre, hateful ritual mesmerized. But Carolyn wasn't finished. The ultimate humiliation was yet to come. She bent down again. She scraped the now dirty, floor-ground, pulverized paper fragments back into her hand. Grit, dust, and fibers now mingled with the ink. She turned and walked the final 2 steps back to Naomi. Naomi stood frozen, a statue of impossible composure. Her cheek was a blazing map of pain. Her eyes, steady and clear, never left her tormentor's face. Carolyn's face was a mask of pure, triumphant malice. She was high on the power, drunk on the validation. She pulled her hand back. Here's your first-class ticket, princess. She threw the handful of dirty, shredded paper directly into Naomi's face. The paper scraps, mingled with floor grit, hit Naomi's chest and hair. A few pieces, damp with grime, clung to the stinging, tearless skin of her bruised cheek. It was the most degrading, dehumanizing act of the entire encounter. People like Carolyn think they can humiliate anyone. If you believe no one deserves to be treated like garbage, hit that like button right now. Only bullies and their enablers would just scroll by. A collective, sharp gasp sucked the air from the cabin. The sheer, naked audacity of the act was shocking. But the shock lasted only a second. The elderly man in 3C, Arthur, barked a single, sharp, ha. Then he began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate, approving clap. The man in 4A, the one worried about his connection, grinned and joined in. The couple in 1A, their champagne long forgotten, added their enthusiastic applause. Within 3 seconds, a sickening wave of applause rippled through the first-class cabin. They were cheering. They were cheering for the assault. They were celebrating the public humiliation of a woman they had already tried and convicted based on her sneakers and the color of her skin. That crowd is cheering for abuse. If you're not on their side, comment, respect for all, below. Let's show them that decent people are watching. Kinsley Reed's phone was vibrating so hard it almost fell off her tray. The live stream had exploded. The viewer count blasted past 30,000. Comments were flying too fast to even read. Oh, my God. You guys. Kinsley shrieked, forgetting to whisper. She just threw the trash at her. She threw the literal garbage in her face. This is the craziest thing I have ever seen. And everyone is clapping. They are so done with this scammer. The police are on their way. This is live justice. This is insane. Mark Fuller, hearing the applause, turned from his radio and nodded once in grim approval. He had his justification. Captain Bishop checked his watch again, satisfied. The problem was subdued. The trash was being taken out. Naomi Sinclair did not move. She didn't wipe the grit from her face. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. A single paper scrap, like a twisted piece of confetti, was stuck in her hair just above her ear. She just stood there watching. She watched Carolyn, who was breathing heavily, her chest puffed with victory. She watched the passengers, clapping and recording her shame. Her eyes were clear, cold, and utterly terrifying. The CEO was gone, replaced by something else. She was a data-gathering machine, and her memory was perfect. She had just logged Exhibit D, public degradation and battery. And the trial was just about to begin. Mark Fuller's thumb clicked off the transmitter. Police are en route. Stay put. The statement was a threat, but it was also redundant. Naomi hadn't moved a muscle. The last, pathetic spatter of applause from the passengers died, sucked into a new, heavier silence. The air in the first-class cabin shifted, the morbid entertainment of the show hardening into the cold, sharp-edged tension of a real-world legal intervention. Kinsley Reed's lens was unshakable, her arm rigid as she filmed. Her viewer count was a frantic, climbing number, 35,000. They were all waiting for the final act, the perp walk. It took less than 90 seconds. The sound from the jet bridge was unmistakable. It wasn't the harried shuffling of late passengers with rollerboards. It was the measured, rhythmic, heavy-booted tread of law enforcement. 3 figures in dark blue airport police uniforms appeared, their presence fundamentally altering the physics of the space. They didn't board, they breached, moving in a tight, practiced, triangular formation. The lead officer, his name tag reading Martinez, was the tip of the spear. He was all business, his face a mask of professional neutrality that radiated zero warmth. He had the weary, cynical eyes of a man who'd heard every sob story, every excuse, and every lie the airport had to offer, and was impressed by none of them. His hand rested casually, meaningfully on his crowded duty belt. Behind him, 2 younger, larger officers fanned out with intimidating precision. One silently pivoted, blocking the aisle to the economy cabin, his arms crossed. The other secured the galley entrance, cutting off any and all retreat. The message was clear. There was no exit. What's the situation? Officer Martinez's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He directed the question at the man in the suit, the one who'd made the call. Officer, thank God you're here, Mark Fuller said, his voice a performance of managerial concern. He gestured at Naomi as if she were a piece of malfunctioning cargo. This individual, as reported, attempted to board with fraudulent documentation. When she was confronted by my senior flight attendant, she became disorderly and violent. Carolyn Pierce, seeing her cue, stepped forward, her transformation from triumphant bully to trembling victim a chilling masterclass in deception. Tears, real or manufactured, welled in her eyes. She assaulted me, officer," Carolyn whispered, her hand fluttering to her chest as if to calm a terrified heart. "When I asked for her pass, she shoved me back into the galley partition. She was screaming, 'She has no ID, no valid ticket. She's just trespassing.' I was afraid for the safety of my passengers." It was a brilliant, concise, and utterly damning lie. Mark Fuller nodded gravely. "A clear-cut case of disorderly conduct and trespassing, officer. We need her removed immediately. We're burning fuel and are about to lose our departure slot. This woman is holding up an entire 777. Officer Martinez's gaze was flat, clinical. He'd been an airport cop for 12 years. This scene fit a depressingly familiar pattern. He had 3 credible witnesses in uniform, Carolyn, Mark, and Captain Bishop, who was now tapping his watch with furious, exaggerated motions, and 1 disruptive individual in street clothes. The math was simple. His eyes scanned Naomi, taking in the scene with a practiced glance. The paper scrap in her hair, the worn-out jeans, the defiant posture, and the angry red handprint on her face. To him it all added up. The problem was clear. He finally addressed Naomi. "Ma'am, here's what's going to happen. You're going to gather your personal belongings and you're going to come with us back to the terminal. We have a flight full of people that needs to leave." "Officer," Naomi said, her voice still quiet, still impossibly steady, "I will not be deplaning. I am the one who was assaulted. Your witness slapped me and destroyed my boarding pass." Martinez cut her off with a raised hand. He'd heard this part of the script before too. The counter-accusation. "Okay, I've heard enough. We're not going to debate this here." "I am not debating," Naomi stated. "I am offering you a solution. I am a ticketed passenger in Seat 2A. If you simply check your system or ask the captain to check his official flight manifest, you will see the name, Naomi Sinclair. Seat 2A. It will take you 10 seconds. Officer Martinez let out a long, weary sigh. It was the sound of a man at the end of a long shift who had 0 patience left for solutions from the person causing the problem. "Ma'am, I'm not a ticket agent. I'm not checking any manifests. You can tell your story to a supervisor back at the precinct. Right now, you are trespassing on a secure aircraft, in violation of federal law, and at the request of the captain." Captain Bishop from the background barked, "Get her off my plane." "That's it. We're done," Martinez said, his decision made. "You're delaying an entire international flight. You need to come with us. Now." "I'm not going anywhere," Naomi said. "Not as a threat. As a statement of fact." "Okay. Have it your way." Martinez's hand went to his belt. He didn't reach for his radio. He didn't reach for his taser. He reached for the steel handcuffs. Click. Shishing. The sound of the metal cuffs being unclipped from their holder and swinging free was shockingly loud in the dead-silent cabin. Kinsley Reed's camera, which she'd been forced to slightly lower, snapped back up, the lens zeroing in on the silver gleam of the handcuffs. Her viewer count exploded past 40,000. "He's got cuffs. He's arresting her." Kinsley shrieked into her phone, all pretense of whispering gone. "They are arresting the scammer. This is live." The digital departure board, visible from the galley, flickered. FLT 447 departure 4:15 p.m. The current time in bright red digits was 4:07 p.m. 8 minutes. This was it. The point of no return. Officer Martinez stepped forward, the handcuffs in his left hand, his right hand reaching for Naomi's arm. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Put your hands behind your back." Officer Martinez's fingers tightened on the cold, serrated steel of the handcuffs. He was in command. The scene was contained. The perpetrator was identified. The next action was simple, practiced, and irreversible. He took the final step forward, his other hand moving with practiced speed toward Naomi's wrist. This was the moment. The final, humiliating, public click of the ratchet. Kinsley Reed's camera was steady, her breath held. Her 40,000 viewers were watching a live arrest. The passengers in the cabin leaned in, their own phones held high, a digital firing squad ready to capture the kill shot. Put your hands behind your officer. Naomi's voice cut through the cabin with the force of a sonic boom. It wasn't the voice he had heard before, the quiet, pleading victim voice. This voice was new. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated, Arctic cold command. It was the voice of a person who doesn't ask for things but receives them. Martinez, through pure reflex, froze. His hand hovered an inch from her arm. Before you make a career-ending mistake, Naomi said, her eyes locking on his, I suggest you look in this bag. The phrase career-ending mistake hung in the air, electric and absurd. Who was she to threaten his career? The sheer, arrogant audacity of it was baffling. But it was Carolyn who reacted first. She saw the officer's hesitation. She saw the narrative shifting. She saw her power, her perfect moment beginning to crack. She had to seal the deal. She had to end this. She's reaching. Carolyn shrieked, her voice cracking into a panicked, hysterical register. She's reaching for something. Officer, she's got a weapon. She said she had something in her bag. A weapon. This was the magic word. The ultimate trump card. In a post-9/11 aircraft, there was no deadlier accusation. The entire cabin atmosphere flashed from drama to terror. Passengers gasped and physically recoiled. The man in 3C who had been clapping, now tried to shrink behind his seat. Kinsley Reed's whisper was a terrified hiss. Oh my God, you guys, she has a weapon? Is she a terrorist? Officer Martinez's training took over instantly. His entire demeanor shifted from public servant to threat neutralizer. Click. The handcuffs dropped from his hand, swinging on their chain from his belt. His hand snapped with terrifying speed to the Kydex holster on his hip. He didn't draw his firearm, but his grip was firm. Hands, he boomed, his voice a physical force that rattled the windows. Ma'am, show me your hands. Slow. Now. The two other officers who had been blocking the aisles instantly moved. One placed his hand on his own sidearm, his eyes wide, scanning Naomi for any sign of a threat. The standoff had escalated from a simple arrest to a potential lethal force encounter in less than a second. Naomi did not flinch. She did not panic. She slowly, deliberately, raised both her hands to shoulder height, palms open and facing the officer. I am following your instructions, officer, she said, her voice still impossibly calm. I am not armed. I am reaching slowly into my messenger bag to retrieve my identification. My hands will not leave your sight. She held his gaze. Martinez, his face a mask of sweat and adrenaline, stared at her, his brain trying to reconcile her terrifying calm with the flight attendant's hysterical screaming. Okay, he said, his voice tight. Slow. Just the ID. Use 2 fingers. Slow. Naomi nodded once. With meticulous, exaggerated slowness, she lowered one hand to the unzipped flap of her worn canvas messenger bag. The entire plane was silent, save for Carolyn's panicked breathing and Kinsley Reed's frantic, whispered narration. She dipped 2 fingers into the bag and pulled out. Not a wallet. It was a simple black leather portfolio. It was thin, worn at the edges, but made of a quality of leather that felt out of place with the rest of her outfit. It was a boardroom item. She held it up between her thumb and forefinger. This is my identification, she said. She did not toss it to him. She did not hand it over. She held it in front of her chest. And with her other hand, just as slowly, she unsnapped a single silver button and flipped the portfolio open. The item inside was not a driver's license. It was a heavy, credential-style badge, recessed into a leather backing. A massive, gold leaf and holographic American Airlines eagle gleamed under the dim cabin lights, flashing with official, impossible-to-fake authenticity. Below the eagle was a photo. And below the photo was text. Officer Martinez, his hand still on his gun, froze. His eyes squinted, trying to read the words from 3 feet away. Kinsley Reed, a consummate professional, saw the gleam. Her camera, which had been shaky, suddenly became rock steady. She hit the zoom. The phone's digital lens punched in, past Naomi's face, past the leather, blurring and then sharpening with a tap of her finger, focusing directly on the text. Her 42,000 viewers saw it the same moment Martinez did. The cabin, which had been a hive of terrified whispers, was plunged into a silence so deep it felt like the pressure had dropped. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of 40 minds simultaneously, catastrophically breaking. The text on the badge, in bold, official, sans-serif font, was unmistakable. Naomi Sinclair, Chief Executive Officer, American Airlines Global Operations. A single sharp gasp from Kinsley Reed's direction was the only sound that broke the void. Captain Frank Bishop, who had been glaring at his watch, slowly lifted his head. Mark Fuller's smug, satisfied smirk dissolved, his jaw unhinging as if his facial muscles had been severed. And Carolyn Pierce. She stared at the badge. She stared at the face of the woman she had slapped. She stared at the name. And all the blood, all the righteous, furious color, drained from her face, leaving a pasty, sickly, greenish white. Her mouth opened, a perfect O of horror, but no sound came out. She saw the name. She saw the title. And she saw the bright red handprint on her new boss's face. The reversal was not a slow tide turning. It was a guillotine. The silence in the cabin was so absolute it was a physical force, pressing in on everyone. Officer Martinez's hand, which had been reaching for Naomi's wrist, was now frozen in midair. He looked at the badge. He looked at the bruised face. He looked at the badge again. His own face, a mask of professional cynicism just seconds before, went pale. He didn't just take his hand off his sidearm. He stepped back, a single involuntary step of profound professional terror. Captain Frank Bishop let out a sound, a choked, half-gasp, half-grunt. "No," he muttered. "It wasn't a statement. It was a prayer. That's not possible." Mark Fuller's reaction was the most immediate. His trembling, which had been a minor tremor of anger, became a full-blown, uncontrollable shudder. The heavy radio handset, which he'd clutched like a scepter, slipped from his sweaty, nerveless fingers. It clattered to the galley floor with a clack thud that sounded like a gunshot in the dead-silent cabin. And Carolyn's entire reality had just been inverted. She stared at the gleaming gold eagle, her mind, her entire being, refusing to process the information. It was impossible. This animal, this trash, could not be the apex predator of her entire food chain. "It's fake," she shrieked, her voice a desperate, ragged tear in the silence. "It's a fake. It's a good fake, but it's fake. Officer, she's a con artist. A professional. She was trying to build the narrative back, to paste the broken pieces of her world together, but she was failing. She's lying. Arrest her. Arrest her." Naomi didn't even look at her. She let the last pathetic shriek echo and die. She simply folded the portfolio, her movements methodical and calm. "You're right," she said, her voice quiet. "A badge can be faked." She reached back into her worn messenger bag. Carolyn flinched as if expecting a real weapon this time. Naomi pulled out a single folded piece of paper. She unfolded it once, twice. It was thick, cream-colored, corporate letterhead, heavy enough to have its own gravity. At the top, an American Airlines eagle was embossed not in ink, but in genuine, gleaming gold leaf. "This, however," Naomi said, "is harder to duplicate." She held it up. It was her official corporate appointment letter, dated 3 years prior. It was covered in legal language, but at the bottom, 2 signatures were clearly visible. One was the chairman of the board. The other was the Secretary of Transportation. A complex, holographic watermark shimmered under the cabin lights. Captain Frank Bishop, a man who had signed thousands of official FAA and corporate documents, recognized the real thing. He lunged forward, snatching the letter from her hand with a desperate, trembling grip. His eyes, the sharp eyes of a pilot, scanned the document. He saw the watermarks. He saw the embossed, pressure-sealed corporate logo. He saw the signature of Arthur Colwell, a man he'd only seen on a teleprompter at annual meetings. His weathered face didn't just go pale, it went ashen gray. The paper shook in his hand. This is," he stammered, "this is real. And just in case there's any lingering doubt," Naomi said, "let's clear it up." She pulled out her phone. The one Carolyn had slapped from her grip. She tapped the screen once, opening her favorites. She pressed the first name, Rachel Cole Exec. And then she hit the speakerphone button. A crisp, professional ringtone echoed through the cabin. One ring. To Rachel Cole, Executive Office of the CEO. "How may I direct your call?" The voice was pure, professional, high-level corporate. "Rachel," Naomi said, "this is Naomi. I'm currently on Flight 447 at DFW, Gate 42A. I seem to be having a small crisis of identity. Could you please confirm my identity and current position for the crew and airport police present? There was a half-second pause. Of course, Miss Sinclair. Stand by. The sound of a keyboard clacking. Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel's voice came through the speaker as clear and sharp as a scalpel. You are speaking with Naomi Sinclair, the Chief Executive Officer of American Airlines Global Operations. She is traveling incognito today for a standard, pre-approved passenger experience audit, per Corporate Protocol 7G. Her identity is confirmed. Her authority is absolute. Is there anything else I can do for you, Miss Sinclair? The cabin held its breath. Kinsley Reed's live stream had hit 50,000 viewers. Her phone was buzzing so violently it was a blur. She turned the camera to her own face, her jaw on the floor, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and electric glee. Oh, my God, she screamed, all pretense of a whisper gone. It's her. It's the CO. The actual CO. She slapped the CO. She threw trash at the CO of the entire airline. She flipped the camera back to the scene. The comment section was a vertical, white blur of pure, digital hysteria. Holy S******. Career ended. Live on IG. This is the greatest thing I have ever seen. Hashtag CO reveal IS trending #1 in the US. Hashtag first class fraud IS gone. Yes, this is the moment. If your jaw is on the floor, hit that subscribe right now. Only people who support arrogant bullies like Carolyn won't. The full, catastrophic weight of reality finally landed on the crew. Carolyn Pierce made a small, choking sound. Her legs gave out. She didn't faint, but she collapsed backward into an empty jump seat, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes rolling back as a low, horrifying moan escaped her. No. I didn't know. Oh my God, I didn't know. Mark Fuller was babbling, his hands held up in surrender. Miss Sinclair. Ma'am, this is a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We were just following procedure. We apologize. A misunderstanding? Naomi's voice was pure ice. She cut him off and he flinched as if she'd slapped him. You think this is about you not recognizing me? You think this entire performance was a procedural error? She shook her head slowly, a look of profound, chilling disappointment on her face. No, Mark. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. She turned for the final time to her worn canvas messenger bag. The crew watched in abject horror. What else was in there? This time she pulled out a thick, dog-eared, beige manila folder. It was bulging with paper. Scrawled on the tab in black Sharpie was a simple, terrifying label. Crew 447 Discrimination Audit. Plot twist 2. This, Naomi said, her voice dropping, is my other project. She opened the folder. While my office has been processing reports of incidents on this route, I've been doing my own digging. She pulled out a stapled incident report and held it up. Carolyn, she said, her voice soft. Carolyn looked up, tears streaming down her face, her makeup a ruin. Does passenger Al-Jamil ring a bell? March 14th? The Muslim man you refused to serve a hot meal to, claiming he was on a special needs list? He filed a complaint. It's here. She pulled another. Mark. The Rodriguez family. June 2nd. You had them removed from first class because their children were too loud and disruptive, despite the fact that, according to 3 other witnesses, the children in 1A were far louder. The Rodriguezes were Hispanic. The family in 1A was white. Their complaint is here. She looked at Captain Bishop, whose ashen face was now dripping with sweat. Frank. Passenger Davies. August 30th. A black passenger who complained that his call button was ignored for 45 minutes. You met him at the gate with police, claiming he was belligerent and threatening. His complaint is also here. She let the reports fall from her hand, scattering onto the floor around Mark Fuller's dropped radio. This, Naomi announced to the cabin, to the live stream, to the entire watching world, is not a file about one mistake. This is a file about a system. This is a folder containing 47 separate, documented discrimination complaints filed against this specific crew, against you, Carolyn, you, Mark, and you, Captain Bishop, in the last 18 months alone. The air left the cabin. This wasn't about a slap. This wasn't about one bad day. This was about a serial abuse of power that had just, in the most spectacular way possible, finally met its reckoning. This wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. Carolyn and her crew were serial abusers. If you are sick and tired of toxic systems that protect bullies, comment, expose them all below. The thick, vibrating silence of the cabin was shattered by a new sound. A phone. It was Naomi's, buzzing angrily in her hand. Kinsley Reed's camera, which had been shakily trying to capture the tears, the sweat, and the damning 47-page file all at once, now snapped to the phone screen. The caller ID was stark: Arthur Colwell, chairman. The entire cabin and the 60,000 people on the live stream saw it. This wasn't a manager. This wasn't a captain. This was the top. This was the man who hired the CEO. Mark Fuller let out a small, strangled sound. Captain Bishop's face, which had been ashen gray, somehow paled further, becoming a waxy, translucent white. Naomi let it ring once more, a form of torture. Then her thumb moved and she answered. On speakerphone. Naomi. Thank God. The voice that boomed from the tiny speaker was panicked, static-laced, and terrifying. It was the voice of Arthur Colwell, the chairman of the board, and he sounded like he was having a heart attack. Are you safe? Are you hurt? The board is watching this live stream. We have the feed on the main wall. The stock is in free fall, Naomi. We're hemorrhaging. It's a PR catastrophe. What in God's name is happening on that plane? Kinsley Reed's stream exploded. The chairman. The stock is tanking. Yes, this is bigger than I thought. This is global. Naomi Sinclair stood in the eye of the hurricane she had created. Her voice, in stark contrast to the chairman's panic, was preternaturally calm. I'm perfectly safe, Arthur, she said, her voice carrying through the cabin. And you're right, it is a catastrophe. But before we discuss the Q4 stock price, this crew needs to hear my final piece of evidence. Arthur on the other end went silent. The crew looked at each other in abject terror. What else could there possibly be? The badge, the letter, the phone confirmation, and the 47 file. That was everything, wasn't it? Naomi held up her phone. She swiped, closing the call screen, and opened a different app. An audio recorder. On the screen was a single long digital waveform. And a runtime. 37 hours 14 minutes and 2 seconds. 37 hours 15 minutes and 2 seconds. 37 hours 16 minutes and 2 seconds. This app, Naomi explained to the dead silent room, is called Auditor. It's a proprietary app we developed for our incognito passenger audits. It's been recording high-quality, encrypted audio from the moment I scanned my boarding pass at the gate. She looked at Carolyn, whose face was now a streaked, blotchy ruin of terror and running mascara. It recorded you calling me an animal. It recorded the sound of your hand hitting my face. It recorded you grinding my pass into the floor. She tapped the screen. Her own voice, crystal clear, filled the cabin. As I told your employee, she destroyed my paper boarding pass. Then Carolyn's voice, shrieking and hateful, her pass was a fake. It was a bad photocopy, sir, I could tell immediately. Then Mark Fuller's voice, dripping with contempt, ma'am, we're done here. We don't negotiate with criminals. Then Captain Bishop's growl, I want her off my aircraft. I don't care what her story is. Get her off. Now. Naomi stopped the playback. The crew's own voices, their own lies, hung in the air like poison gas. It recorded every single lie you told the captain, Naomi said quietly. It recorded every threat, every slur. It's all here. Time-stamped, geotagged, and instantly uploaded to a secure corporate server. It is legally admissible and it is ironclad. This was the final blow. The 47 complaints were the pattern. This audio file was the high-definition, undeniable proof of this crime. It was this, the sound of her own voice lying, her own voice dripping with hate, that finally, completely broke Carolyn Pierce. She didn't just sob. She collapsed. It was a total system failure. She fell into the attendant jump seat, her body folding in on itself. A raw, animalistic wail of pure, undiluted despair tore from her throat. Please, she shrieked, the word dissolving into a mess of hyperventilating sobs. Please, Miss Sinclair, please, I'm begging you. I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. This was the defense, the one she had been clutching. I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college, she wailed, rocking back and forth. My husband is sick, He can't work. You'll ruin me. You'll ruin my family. Was a mistake. I was just trying to do my job. I was protecting the cabin. Please. Naomi's face, which had been a mask of cold professionalism, hardened into something else. Something far more terrifying. She took a single step closer to the sobbing woman. You didn't know? She repeated, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than Carolyn's screams. That is your defense? That you only reserve this kind of treatment for the passengers you think are poor? That you only assault the ones who won't fight back? She leaned in. You didn't know that you shouldn't put your hands on another human being? You didn't know that you shouldn't use racial slurs and call a paying customer an animal? Her voice rose, sharp and cracking like a whip. You didn't know that you shouldn't grind garbage into the floor and throw it in a human being's face? You didn't know that you shouldn't bear false witness to a police officer to have an innocent person arrested? Is that what you're telling me, Carolyn? That your morality is conditional? Carolyn had no answer. She just wept, her face buried in her hands. Naomi straightened up. She turned her gaze, sweeping it across the three broken employees. Carolyn, a ruined heap. Mark, vibrating so hard he looked like he might blur out of existence. Frank, the captain, standing rigid, his face slick with a sheen of cold, terrified sweat. You all have a choice, Naomi announced. Right now. In front of 60,000 people and the chairman of the board. You have exactly two options. You will choose one. And you will choose it together. She held up one finger. Option 1. You are all immediately suspended without pay for 6 months. You will undergo 120 hours of mandatory sensitivity, de-escalation, and bias training, which you will pay for out of your own pocket. And Carolyn, you will personally contact on your own time and verbally apologize to every single one of the 47 victims in this file whose complaints you ignored. If you complete this, you may be eligible for probationary reemployment. She let that hang in the air. As a gate agent. In Anchorage. In January. A fresh wave of despair hit Carolyn. That's option 1, Naomi said. It is far more generous than you deserve. She held up 2 fingers. Option 2. I hang up this call. I hand this 37-minute audio file and this entire folder of 47 prior complaints to Officer Martinez, and I will be pressing full charges for assault, battery, defamation, and filing a false police report. I will then instruct Arthur to have you all immediately terminated. For cause. She let the legal term sink in. For cause. Which means you lose your pensions. You lose your benefits. You lose your 401ks and your flight privileges. You will be permanently banned from this airline, and I will personally call the CEOs of Delta, United, and Southwest and ensure you are blacklisted. You will never work in this industry again. She's got them. If you believe every bully should face the consequences, smash that like button. Let's show the algorithm we stand for real accountability. Naomi looked at her phone's timer. The choice is yours. You have 30 seconds. The panic was immediate. The 3 of them looked at each other, their eyes wide with terror. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution, and they were being allowed to choose the method. Frank Bishop, the proud captain, his career, his pension, his entire identity flashing before his eyes, was the first to crack. Option 1, he choked out, the words thick. We'll take option 1. Please. Option 1. Mark Fuller, babbling, just nodded frantically. Yes, option 1, ma'am, please, Miss Sinclair, yes, option 1, thank you, thank you. Carolyn couldn't even speak. She just looked up from her hands, her face a horrific mask of tears and ruined makeup, and nodded, her entire body shaking in violent, jerking motions. Naomi held their gaze for a long, cold second. A wise choice, she said. She turned back to her phone. Arthur, are you still there? I'm here, Naomi, the chairman's voice said, now quiet and awed. My God. Good, Naomi said. Get legal on the line. We need to draft 3 immediate suspension and probation agreements. And Arthur? We need to talk about some new mandatory company-wide protocols. Good, Naomi said again, her voice flat. She clicked off the speakerphone, cutting off Chairman Colwell's flustered sputtering. The crisis for him was just beginning. For the crew of Flight 447 it was over. She turned her gaze to the 2 men. They were standing like statues, their careers in ruins, awaiting the final sentence. Mark, she said. He flinched. Your managerial days are over. Effective immediately, you're demoted to ramp agent. You'll be on the baggage line in Anchorage with Carolyn. You wanted to handle cargo, now you can. She then looked at the captain, a man who had commanded a 777 and was now visibly shaking. And you, Captain Bishop. Your authority on my aircraft is revoked. You're stripped of your international captain status. You're being reassigned to domestic short haul. You'll be flying 50-seater commuters out of Des Moines. Effective immediately. They just nodded, their faces hollow, too broken to even argue. Naomi then turned her attention back to her phone, addressing the chairman as if he were still on speaker. Arthur, tell the board we are implementing the Sinclair protocols, effective this quarter. This isn't negotiable. She began to tick off the points, her voice ringing with absolute authority. 1. Mandatory full-time body cameras for all customer-facing crew. All footage will be automatically uploaded and reviewed for discrepancies. 2. We are establishing a new independent Office of Passenger Equity. It will be headed by civil rights attorneys, not HR, and will have unilateral authority to investigate and terminate. 3. All executive bonuses, including mine, will be tied directly to a 0% discrimination complaint rate. If our passengers aren't safe, our stock price doesn't matter. Her final gaze, cold and heavy, landed on the weeping heap that was Carolyn Pierce. And as for your training, Carolyn, Naomi said, her voice devoid of any pity, you're going to teach it. You are going to stand in front of every single new hire class for the next year. You will tell them this story. You will describe in detail how you assaulted a passenger, how you lied to the police, how your bigotry cost you your career. You will be my living example of option 2. Am I clear? Carolyn could only nod, her sobs the only sound in the cabin. Finally, Naomi turned to Officer Martinez, who had been standing by, his handcuffs now tucked away, a silent, stunned witness. We're good here, officer. Thank you for your time. You can stand your men down. Martinez, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost, simply nodded. Yes, ma'am. He and his officers quickly exited the aircraft. Naomi took a deep breath. She looked past the shattered crew to the galley entrance, where a new, young, and utterly terrified flight attendant was peeking in. You, Naomi said, pointing. The girl flinched. What's your name? Maria, ma'am, she whispered. Well, Maria, Naomi said, walking past Carolyn and taking her assigned seat in 2A. She buckled her seatbelt. Please close the cabin door. We're late. Naomi didn't just get revenge, she changed the entire system. If you believe one person can make a difference, hit subscribe and share this story. Don't let the haters and trolls have the last word.